Hello there, it's Jennifer today with the fabulous Janet Taylor from Parents Never Give Up. Hello, Janet.
Hello, Jennifer. Thank you for having me today. I really appreciate this.
Oh, it is going to be so awesome to chat with you. I've been looking so forward to this all week long. Janet, I met Janet because I started watching her Instagram videos. And Janet, like I said, owns a company, Parents Never Give Up. She has a unique and a story that I think is going to touch a lot of us and really help us in our parenting of teens. Our focus today is Janet really wants to talk about empowering parents to be in control of what they can be in control of. And, you know, this is coming at a time when they're dealing with their children are dealing with mental health and addictions. And I just can't wait to get started. So Janet, tell us how you got into creating Parents Never Give Up. And then we'll just chat about things that can really help parents through this time.
Sounds great. Thank you, Jennifer. That's a beautiful intro. So basically my journey started 6 years ago. Almost 7 years ago now, when my oldest daughter was 12. And she got into a lot of situations that aren't ideal, but a lot of situations that I realize now. She was into drugs. She was into self-harm. She was into cutting, all kinds of stuff that we hope our children avoid. But unfortunately, she started doing that. The school started falling off. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today is hindsight. So that is unfortunately sometimes all we have, but that is why I created Parents Never Give Up. And it taught me a lot of things about myself, but mostly about the system, about mental health, about what our children are really going through and their struggles that we don't always see because we are so busy right now. And again, like you touched on there, my goal is to empower other parents to control what they can control, because it took me a lot of years to realize that all I could really do to help her the most was to control how I acted, to stay present in what she was going through to help her the best I could. And also to establish some boundaries. I know we'll touch on that later, but in establishing my boundaries, she fortunately is still around here today. She still struggles with the drugs, not so much the self-harm, not so much the heavier drugs. And I'm not by any means justifying that, but she does still struggle with the mental health. And there's a whole system out there to support the children. And what I found out after 5 years of being really deep into the organizations, that we deal with here in Ontario and in Canada, is that, sometimes we have to stand up for ourselves. There's plenty of systems out there for our children. Finding the right ones is key. Finding, advocating for our children is key on their needs, but being aware of exactly what it is that you're being told and stuff is so hard when you're watching your child struggle and in pain and all those things I've had to deal with. So that's a little bit of an overview. And ultimately, like I said, my goal is to empower other parents, but to also save them from having to go through the 5 years that it took me to learn this. So it's very key that we have more parents coming together as groups and supporting each other. That's my goal. That's why I created Parents Never Give Up.
Mm-hmm. So we should say, Janet, that Parents Never Give Up is a coaching. So you are a parent coach. And you do work with parents and help them because, you said it was hindsight, but yeah, that's how we know how we can help other parents, because looking back, here's things I would have done differently, or I would have paid more attention to, even being present is such a big thing. And it's like, it's this word that you hear all the time of being present in our children's life, but what does that look like? And so you have to figure that out, what does being present mean, and to not be so hard on yourself, right?
Mm-hmm. That is key. And there's also actual moments when you're going through similar steps to grief. Mm-hmm. So if I know now, when I am present now, those emotions that I dealt with when I got angry, when I would get hurt, when she would say things that, unbelievable that a child would ever talk to a parent like that. But when you realize that is not coming from this child that you've given all this love to, that is the drugs, that is the alcohol, that is the mental health, that if I had been able to stay present in some of those conversations, what would I have accomplished? What would I have helped? Not just her. Honestly, this is not all about her. This is about us as parents. What would I have been able to accomplish for myself health-wise. I ended up off work for 2 years because I could not process it all. You know, you can, as a parent, I have other children. I have 2 younger children. You're trying to protect everybody as a mother.
Mm-hmm.
But I realize now in hindsight, had I been able to be present to just those moments, those doctor's visits, the hospital visits, certain things, right? It's all hindsight, but there's just keys now. And what I really try and instill in the parents that I work with in my 6-week training program in empowering them is, how do we prevent this? Ideally, what are the signs that I could have seen as a mother if I was really not panicking, if I really wasn't, you know, thinking my child was going to really kill herself, or group homes? My goodness, there's a whole world out there that if your child is mentally healthy, and I hope for most parents' sakes that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
But if your child is not mentally healthy, you've got group homes, you've got psychiatric wards in hospitals, you've got locked up facilities. It's a whole different room. And going through that alone as a mother was horrifying now looking back. And to me, it became normal. That's the actual scariest part, is that when it became normal. And that's when I started talking to other parents and going, wait a second, I'm not the only one here going through this. And that is my key message to parents out there, is that you are not alone. It is painful. It's making me choke up right now, but you know, it's just some of the stuff we see, some of the stuff our own children are doing. Her scars alone are unbelievable. So
I'm sorry that you all had to go through that. And I think your message that you're not alone, really people need to hear, because chances are if you have teens, there's something in this message that you need to hear. And thank you for just being that person to make sure we know we're not alone. Now, when we spoke earlier, Janet, you talked about some like really actionable steps, things that parents can do to maybe be more present or aware of what is going on in their children's lives. And can you just name a few of those? And you know, I know when we talked about it before, some of it was like, oh, is that stepping over, you know, confidentiality with my child? And so I really want to get your take on what, you know, what those steps could be, really just kind of spell it out for us. And
Sure. Thank you.
Too, talking about comfort level, because a lot of parents aren't comfortable with some of the things you're going to say with. So
that's true.
Can you speak to that as well, and give us, I don't know, give us you know, you need to do this. It's okay to do this. It may not feel comfortable, but you need to do these check-ins. So anyway, take it away and just tell us like some of these steps we can take.
Sure. Thank you. That is key too. When we all have children, and I had my children younger than some, but we have no time, obviously, to write a book on what it is like to raise a child. But in this time and place, the technology alone is giving our children tools that we as parents can't even keep up with. So my biggest lesson to parents is you stay on top of that technology. We're talking 10, 11, 12-year-olds that are harming themselves because they can go online. They can open up a resource that you and I never had at the playground, of thousands of other people that support them in this dangerous behavior that you and I as mothers, or any of us here as parents, would never want our children to be partaking in. They are putting up naked pictures of themselves. They are seeing a darkness in a world where they can be criticized by people they don't even know instead of supported. And so I think it's very important, when I go back to something one of the psychiatrists had told me way back as a parent, is that we establish the boundary. And it seems hard these days, but I will tell all the parents here, your job is to be their parent. It is not to be their friend. And my daughter can tell you how many times I have said that to her. I never laid a hand on her, but there were moments that you have got to stick to that rules, the boundaries. I always had a rule. There were no drugs in my house. That led to us being involved in children's aid and stuff, because those were my rules. If my child was doing drugs, that was not me being a good parent to my child. That was not me allowing my child to develop, to grow, to enjoy childhood. Some of just even, let's say, the TV shows that they have access to, or the movies they have access to. as a parent, I want my child to have fun. I want her to play outside. I want her or him to have friends. As the parent, though, I need to know those friends. I need to know that you're going where you really say you're going. Whether I did what I did as a child has no partake in me being a parent. My job as a parent is to keep my child alive, to thrive, to achieve their goals. That's kind of how I looked at parenting, and that's me.
Mm-hmm.
And some parents may disagree, they may not. The other thing I want to touch on is when our children have money, right? Our children seem to have more access to funds or whatever it is. It's very important that you be aware of where this money is going, because drugs right now, I'm not talking cocaine. I'm not talking ecstasy. I'm talking Tylenol. I am talking pain pills that are in your cupboard. Our children can use this technology. And I speak from experience. The very first time my daughter got high and I had to take her to the hospital because she overdosed was cancer medication at a friend's place. They Googled it. They had the pill bottle in their hands. They Googled what they could do to this to get high, literally put that in Google. Now, if they had not had access to a computer that wasn't supervised, if they hadn't had access to the cancer medication, which as a parent, you don't think Tylenol, baby aspirin in your cupboard is going to do anything. And I don't need to spend a lot of time there because that's obviously out there now that this is an issue. But there's also behaviors in your children's friends, in who they hang around with. For my daughter, some of the key things I noticed, the whole friend group changed all of a sudden. One summer, all of a sudden you're hanging out with these people, and then there was a whole new group of friends. I should have taken it upon myself to ask some questions that unfortunately I didn't think to ask. So it's really just kind of, as a mother, simplifying what my daughter's life looks like, her best life, what I would want it to look like, what her life is, and just kind of being aware of that. As I know, I'm sure you've said it too, we have that gut instinct as parents. It's really staying on top of that and just being aware of the environment. But my biggest thing I would want people to take away from here is be the parent. There's boundaries you have to establish. Your child is starving for guidelines. And the school system, the education system is overwhelmed. I'll put it nicely that way. It is overwhelmed. And our children have this power in school, whether it's their teachers, whether it's the administration, if it's too many of them, I'm not sure. But they have a power in school that we never had. So they seem to be up here and the parents are here, whereas it should be kind of the parents, the teachers, the adults. The respect level is almost missing. So asking your children to respect some simple rules, curfews, chores, but keeping them busy, keeping them involved in the community, it's the biggest key. But the biggest also is the respect towards you as a parent for yourself as well. That for me was very important. And I know this because she told me later that she always knew what my rules were going to be. And this is years later, but she knew I had to keep these rules. So somewhere in her head, and I mean, we're talking brain damage now, but somewhere in that head, she still kept on track. She knew I loved her. I made it a very key point of reading to my children every night, of tucking them in, telling them I love them whenever I could get that chance. And sometimes that sounds so simple, but we forget to do those little things. And I'm going to try not to get choked up, but I can't imagine my daughter, because she's been out of the house for 5 years, going to bed at night by herself and choosing that. And so I've seen parents that hide some of what they know, or, your friends are doing this and your friends are doing that. And we kind of shy away from these awkward, painful conversations, but they're painful for us. But I think our children want us to ask these questions. They want us to touch on this stuff. And we're not talking sex ed anymore now. We are talking self-harm. We are talking suicidal attempts, and we are talking drugs, alcohol to a level that we can't even comprehend. And that's where it's so important. Be the parent and be the role model. Know in your heart that you're meant to be. I hope that answers it.
It definitely does, and more. And it just, being consistent, like a couple things came to mind there when you're talking about, it's all about being present. And, in our world right now, we've got so many labels for parents. I think it's really unfair about all these labels, and it's unfair about all the labels we give our kids too.
True.
So,
True.
Wouldn't the world be best without these labels? When you're speaking about just being aware of what's going on in your child's even social media life. And what came to mind was, we're going to hear from parents saying, oh, you're a helicopter parent, then you're in control of everything. You see
good.
everything they do. But I don't think it's a helicopter parent.
No.
I think it brings it back to what you want to empower parents to do, and that is just to be present.
Hmm.
Because if I'm sitting beside, my son and we're chatting about something and, happens to be on social media, it's not a helicopter parent, it's me being present to sit there. Or maybe the phone is, my boys, if they're 13, they don't have phones anyway.
Good for you. Good for you.
But I'm like, example of, I can still be present in every moment. And it's not helicopter parent, it's putting down. I said this to Kyle. I had a chat with Kyle last night, and we were talking about also being present,
Hmm.
and the effects of social media. And I made a promise starting this school year to my kids that from 5 p.m. till
Hmm.
their bedtime, you will not see me on my phone or computer
Wow, that's
at
awesome.
all. And I
Awesome.
thought, I don't want them to remember, like have a vision in their head of me staring at my phone.
Right. Right.
And gosh, I love what I do. So I could be doing that all night, but I love my kids too. And it's more important that I know what's going on with them. So in this this is the second week of school now,
Right.
I've been able to, like you said, read every day,
Hmm.
see what they're doing when they're playing a video game,
Hmm.
play soccer, play baseball, just do things that aren't possible when your head's in your phone all the time. So, and it's
Even
such a good
just you
example.
talking about it like this, you can hear the passion in your voice of getting to spend that time, that
Hmm.
quality time, because how
Yeah.
fast did they get to be 13?
Hmm.
You blink and your
And
children are that old already, and you're going, I missed it.
yeah.
And we survived. We survived playing outside.
Hmm.
So to those helicopter parents, I would ask them to take a look back at their childhood. I
Hmm.
really would.
Hmm.
And say, we weren't on the phones. Maybe we were on Atari playing Pac-Man, but it was definitely raining outside.
Hmm.
Right. So some of that is very key to check yourself when, like you said, the labels, when we're comparing ourselves to each other, what are we teaching our children in
Hmm.
doing that? If I'm saying, oh, look at Sally's mom, she's doing this, my child's going, oh, I have to compare myself to Sally now, but my biggest key with the phones is when you're in a restaurant, I go out with my kids and I'm like, no phones on the table at home. And when we go out, it better stay in the car. But you see these families, the entire family are each on their phones. It's such
Yeah.
an opportunity to make a memory.
Yeah. I like the other thing you said too, Janet, about your house rules. So the rules in your house doesn't matter. I've heard plenty of times, oh, well, my friends all phones. My friends can all do this. That's okay. That's the rules in their house. This is
Yep.
the rules in our house. And just being able to have those boundaries
Hmm.
and stick to them. And I think, your mission to really empower parents to know that it's okay to have boundaries and stick to it. Your kids are not going to thank you for them right now,
No, no.
but down the road they are. Actually, we had a circumstance this summer where one of our kids came up and said, thank you so much for having those, they didn't say boundaries,
Right.
having these rules,
Uh-huh.
because this helped me do this and that. And I thought, yeah, way to go.
Yeah, exactly. Pat yourself on the
Pat
back
the
for that
back,
one.
but was it difficult to keep those boundaries and keep consistent. So, you know, it's hard. It's hard to do that when we're getting that pushback.
Right. But
But
you have to ask yourself too, at that point, you're hearing this from your child. So this is your child's perspective of what their friend is telling them about their house.
mm-hmm,
You are not having, unless you actually go and have that physical conversation with the parent, which I have had to do in circumstances I've been through. And all of a sudden you realize, wait a second, that parent has exactly the same rules I did. These kids are translating. It's like the game telephone, right?
mm-hmm,
Of course, it's always going to be better outside of your own house. Of course, there's going to be nicer parents.
mm-hmm.
But the reality of it as a parent, in order to empower my clients too, is that where are you getting that info from? Because if it's from your 10-year-old or your 12-year-old that thinks you're Godzilla, of course, you really need to check the validity of that. So no, great that your son came to you and actually
Mm-hmm.
was able to tell you that. Those are the kind of conversations I want parents to have with their children. Those are our moments as parents. That's when we get to pat ourselves on the back and go, I did it right. Because they're few and far between sometimes.
I was just going to say the same thing. Okay, so we talked about what we can do, to just be present
Mm-hmm.
and be aware of what's going on in our children's lives. We talked about setting those boundaries, being consistent and having boundaries and rules. What can we do for ourselves?
That is the key. That is really what took me the 5.5 years,
Mm-hmm.
when all of a sudden, I can honestly tell you, there was a moment when I looked in the mirror at whatever I had become, and it wasn't healthy like this. And I looked at myself and I said, Janet, if you don't do something right this moment, she's going to take you down with you. And as much as I love her, there was no way in hell. I'd been through enough in my own life. I'm going, there's no way in hell I'm going to leave my other two and go cuckoo in the forest or something or whatever was. Had to decide then and look for resources that allow me to grow where I knew I spiritually could grow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's funny because in that moment is where I created my blog, Parents Never Give Up, which is where I led to some coaching training and more empowerment skills. But it just, then I started talking to people. I said, you know what, this is insane. This is what I've been going through the last few years. This is what I'm going to do about it. And all of a sudden, just even making that statement to myself, to leaving everything I had been through before
Mm-hmm.
behind there and saying, okay, I have the ability to do this. I got 2 arms, 2 legs. I'm educated. I have 3 kids. They're all still alive. And there were days when that was, that was close, but I still had these 2 kids. I still have the resources of living where I live. What am I going to do? And what was I missing? And that was that aspect inside me of going, okay, what do I truly control? And the only answer I came up with was how I behave, how I act, how I support her or choose to not support her. I cut myself off from her for a good 6 months so I could heal. And that's crazy, right? When you think of choosing not to see your child, but this wasn't my child either. This was an addicted young woman who was, struggling and I needed to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And in giving myself that permission to heal, that changed my whole life. And the last 2 years have been moving forward from it. And you had touched on it earlier that you can't imagine what you go through. I can't imagine that it wasn't me that went through this now, because fortunately enough, I've had friends that say, how do you get up in the morning? Because this is ongoing still to this day. But how I deal with it now is I just love her when I can love her. I love her from close. I love her from far. But I still set those boundaries as to how much am I going to be sucked in. But I also have skills that I've taught myself, whether they be mantras, whether people call them meditation. It's really being in that present moment of going, okay, this is what happened. What realistically can I do here for myself? Can I really deal with this right now? I no longer have to leave work if something happens. I no longer have to drop everything.
Mm-hmm.
I can now treat her like she's 19. You're an adult. You've chosen this. I've chosen this. And now we are starting to meet in the middle. So I really want to instill with parents that this has so far a really good ending, in the sense that having established those boundaries now have allowed her to open up to me in ways that we didn't get to before, however that was.
Mm-hmm.
But that she really is appreciating what she's done, what I've done. And however that looks to people, but in the sense that, she's proud of me. I'm proud of her for being able to do this. So, but it really took me to consciously say, okay, I matter, because you're going to be at these meetings, you're going to be in these hospitals, you're going to be spending hours, places you couldn't even imagine. Like, who knew there's psychiatric wards in every children's hospital in Canada for sure. And to see your child locked in a room because they are psychotic, to put it mildly, and that's not a medical definition, folks, but that they've lost control of their ability to not hurt themselves. I mean, it's like there was a separation between, okay, I'm here physically, this is me, Janet, and that's my daughter, but what realm of reality are we in? And so I had to, had some come to Jesus moments.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, really, all I can control is, what am I going to do about this today, right now? And for me, I'm fortunate enough, it led me to helping others. It led me to helping myself, for one, and in realizing that we are not alone, that there's thousands of parents going through this right now. And what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do to help our children and show them, as a group, as a collective group of young adolescents that are feeling left out? How do we let them know that we care?
Mm-hmm.
We do care, no matter how busy we are. And that's part of it too, is, do we really need to live these lives we're living, and we're busting our asses instead of sitting down at dinner time, having family dinners, all these things that is just so simple, So
Thank you for sharing that, Janet.
thank you.
I have so many things I want to say about this,
Go ahead.
which is going to lead us into a really long conversation, but mostly I just want to say thank you for letting us know that we're not alone. And your story, I think no one could have handled it differently. We all lose ourselves when our kids are hurting. And I also know what it feels like to come to that realization that you can't control anything but yourself. And how that does change everything, because once you know that, you can be emotionally present for them when they need you, which is not going to be all the time, which is different from when they were younger. They needed you all the time.
Right.
Now, as they're older, there's going to be times that they need you, and you need to be fully present and emotionally available for them. But I haven't talked to anyone that can do that when these things first happen.
Correct.
So if you are going through this and you are in deep right now and you are struggling and your life is out of control, you're calling in sick, you're not able to function, I think that's pretty normal, because we don't want our kids to hurt, and we feel responsible, and we feel like we have to worry constantly about it, but the worrying doesn't change anything. And when you are with your daughter or son that's going through this, and if you can't be strong, how are they ever going to know to be weak and let you in?
To be human. You want to role model it for them that you're struggling as well, because then there is something in that they pick up on, right? They're very little, very feeling creatures, very empathic, or I'm not sure if that's the right word, but they really sense that. And for us to try and be tough, for us to try and pretend like it's all okay when we're crying in front of them because we can't help them, or we're yelling at them, but they've done nothing wrong, but we're yelling out of sheer fear. I'll say it. It was fear. Like,
Fear.
I mean,
guilt,
you're
shame,
petrified. Yep. Guilt, shame.
All those emotions of,
for sure. And you're dealing with, like you said, you're dealing with everything else in your own life. So when they open up, and they're going to be weird moments, I realize now it's going to be absolutely weird moments that all of a sudden your child is like, there's a different tone of the voice I can detect now in my youngest. And I'm like, okay, I need to pay attention. Something just changed in her voice. And every once in a while too, that my son and daughter, they'll bring it up. Like my son came to me one day and goes, Mom, it feels like I don't have a sister. Like I forget. And I said, that's fair. That is fair. I forget, because there was times I didn't see her for such a long period of time. And you keep going, right? You and I wake up the next day. We have to deal with what has happened that day. And now we have to deal. But as I get more and more present, I understand that's okay. That's reality. That's the stages of grief. And you touched on that there's a lot of parents in that moment where you're panicked. Your whole world, like your whole crystal ball that we built, or whatever you want to call it, this life that we built for our family that we thought was great, it didn't just like lose a block. That's like a Jenga tower coming down in that moment, that first, and it may not be the first week or two, because there are so many people out there telling you, don't worry, she's going to grow out of it. She's going to grow out of it. I swear I cringe when I hear that.
It's a phase.
Yep. It's a phase. That's, oh, I love that one. Or don't worry, this medication will fix it. Okay, that's fine. That's great. What medication, and what are you diagnosing my daughter with before you give her medication? Because some of the health effects that yes, she's chosen some, I fully get that. But some of the side effects to the medication she was on have caused damage too. So now she's dealing with that. That makes it harder, let's say, for somebody with mental health to have to deal with all this. So, but I do appreciate fully being present now, to being able to help all of my children when I can, and to being able to help the other parents too, because being there, a week can turn into a month very quickly. Then it can turn into 6 months. And if you're still feeling alone at that, you are now struggling yourself. I think both you and I can say that I can say that unequivocally, that I was struggling at that point now, because now we're just hanging on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure of what service we are to our children, and especially to ourselves when we get to that point. So when you're tired, when you're, mentally exhausted, when you're not functioning properly, the dangers to ourselves get to be higher too. So
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Janet.
thank you.
Okay, if anyone wants to reach out to Janet, Janet Taylor, Parents Never Give Up, can be found at parentteens.com and also on Janet's website, parentsnevergiveup.com. Janet is a parent coach, and if you are in this moment now, please reach out to Janet. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jennifer. This was great.
We'll talk again soon. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.